Lena Carter had learned long ago how to stay quiet when life became confusing. She was a 13-year-old girl with soft brown hair that curled at the ends and eyes that always searched for something safe. Since her mother passed away, her world had slowly become smaller, quieter, and a little lonelier every year. She lived with her stepfather, Roy Baxter, a man who drifted from one job to another and from one town to the next. He was not cruel in loud ways, but he had a habit of looking past her, as if she were part of the furniture rather than a living person. He was the kind of man who carried his disappointments with him, like old tools in a bag, never letting go, always letting them drag him down. For Lena, home had not felt like home for a long time. Meals were simple and quiet. Mornings were rushed. Days were filled with worry about what Roy would decide next. Still, she tried to believe that things would get better someday. Maybe Roy would find steady work. Maybe they would stay in one place long enough for her to make friends. Maybe he would remember that her mother had trusted him. She repeated these hopes in her head the way some people repeat prayers. In the early days of summer, Roy suddenly announced that they were leaving town. He said it was time for a fresh start, though he did not explain what that meant. Lena didn't ask questions. She knew from experience that her questions were often ignored. She simply gathered her small bag, 2 shirts, a sweater, her sketchbook, and the photograph of her mother she kept tucked between its pages. They set out in Roy's old, rust-colored truck that rattled more than it purred. The engine made a deep, uneven sound that hinted it had lived a long, hard life. Roy drove with the windows down because the air conditioner had stopped working last year. The wind tangled Lena's hair as she looked out at the passing landscapes, wide plains, rolling hills, and long stretches of empty road that seemed to go on forever. At first, Lena tried to imagine that the trip was something special, a small adventure, a journey to a better place. She sketched the shapes of distant mountains in her notebook and watched the shadows of clouds race across the fields. But after several hours, the excitement faded. Roy grew quiet, more quiet than usual, and he gripped the steering wheel tightly, as if holding on to something inside himself. Lena sensed he was worried, but she didn't know why. By late afternoon, the sky had changed from bright blue to a pale, dusty gold. The road beneath them narrowed as they entered a more remote area, with fences stretching along either side and tall grass waving in the breeze. There were no houses, no stores, no other cars, just long, empty land. The truck began to sputter. At first, it was a small sound, a short cough from the engine. Roy frowned and tapped the dashboard as if that would help. Lena sat up straight, her fingers curling around the strap of her bag. "Is everything okay?" she finally asked, her voice soft. Roy didn't answer. He only pressed harder on the gas pedal, and the truck lurched forward before slowing again. The sound grew louder, like the truck was tired and could no longer carry them. Then, with one final jolt, the engine stopped. The truck rolled to a quiet stop on the side of the empty road. Silence settled around them, a soft blanket of soundlessness, broken only by the gentle rustle of grass outside. Roy opened the door and stepped out, muttering something Lena couldn't hear. She waited a moment, then climbed out as well. The warm air touched her face, and she looked around at the vast stretch of land. There was no sign of help anywhere. Roy kicked at the dry dirt, frustrated. He opened the hood of the truck and stared at the engine with a helpless expression. Lena stood a few steps away, not wanting to get too close but feeling the need to do something. "Do you think it can be fixed?" she asked quietly. Roy didn't answer right away. When he finally spoke, his voice was low and tired. "Truck's done," he said. "It's useless." Lena looked at him, unsure what that meant for them. She waited for him to say what they should do next. Maybe they would walk to find help, or wait for someone to pass by. But Roy didn't look at her. He stared off into the distance as if searching for an idea that just wouldn't come. Minutes passed. The sun dipped lower, brushing the horizon with soft orange light. A peaceful feeling might have settled over someone else, but Lena felt uneasy. Something in Roy's posture, in the way he kept glancing away from her, made her heart flutter with nervousness. At last, Roy turned toward her. His expression was unreadable, and Lena wished she could understand the thoughts behind his eyes. But she couldn't. "Take your bag," he said simply. She obeyed, sliding the strap over her shoulder. She waited for more instructions, but none came. Instead, Roy closed the truck door and stepped back, wiping his hands on his jeans. "You'll be fine," he said, almost as if talking to himself. "You're old enough to handle things." Lena felt a small coldness rush through her, not fear, exactly, but a deep confusion. "What do you mean?" she asked. Roy didn't meet her eyes. He motioned loosely toward the open land. "Just start walking. Someone will come by sooner or later." Lena blinked, trying to understand. "But where are you going?" Roy didn't answer her question. He walked to the back of the truck, took out an old water bottle, and placed it on the ground near her feet. The gesture felt final, like he was giving her something instead of giving her guidance. The quiet stretched between them, and Lena felt a lump rise in her throat. "Can't we stay together?" she whispered. "At least until we find help?" Roy looked at her for a brief moment, and she could see something flicker in his eyes, tiredness, maybe regret, maybe something else entirely. But then, he looked away. "I have things to take care of," he said. "You'll manage. Just keep walking. Someone will find you." Before she could say anything else, he turned and started walking down the road in the opposite direction. His steps were uneven at first, almost hesitant, but then they grew faster. Lena watched him go, her heart thudding gently inside her chest. She didn't shout after him. She didn't chase him. Something inside her told her it wouldn't matter. She stood alone beside the road, holding her bag and staring at the fading figure of the only parent she had left. The stillness of the moment pressed in on her. She waited, expecting him to turn back, to realize she couldn't be left there, that she was just a child. But he didn't. He kept walking until he disappeared around a bend, leaving only the empty landscape behind. Lena's breath trembled a little, but she didn't cry. She had learned how to hold her emotions close, to keep them tucked away in the quiet corners of her heart. She looked at the sky and noticed that the sun's warm light was slipping behind the hills. Evening was coming, and she needed to make a decision. She picked up the water bottle and began to walk. There was a long stretch of land ahead of her, quiet and calm, with tall grass that swayed gently. The air smelled faintly of dust and warm earth. Though she felt small in such a wide place, she also felt something else, a tiny spark inside her, the same spark that had helped her through many difficult days. She followed the road until the road faded into a trail of dirt. She walked until her legs grew tired. The sky darkened slowly, painting gentle purples and pinks across the clouds. For a moment, she paused to catch her breath and looked around. The land was beautiful in a lonely sort of way, like a picture she might have drawn if she weren't so tired. As the first star appeared in the sky, a breeze touched the back of her neck. She hugged her arms around herself and kept moving. She didn't know where she was going, but she believed she had to keep walking. Stopping felt too much like giving up, and she had never been someone who gave up easily. With each step, her hope changed shape. It no longer looked like waiting for Roy to return. Instead, it became a quieter, steadier hope, hope that somewhere ahead there was help, hope that she would find someone who cared enough to listen, hope that life could still change in good ways she could not yet see. She walked until the stars began to scatter across the sky, unaware that her path would soon cross with someone who would change everything for her. She did not know that just a few miles ahead, a rancher named Caleb Hargrove would be riding his horse along a fence line under the same evening sky. She did not know that their meeting would become the moment her story began again. Not with fear, but with a gentle chance at a new life. For now, she walked through the quiet night, guided only by faith in the small spark inside her, a spark that refused to be left behind. Caleb Hargrove had always believed that quiet days were the best kind of days. He was a man in his early 40s with steady hands, calm eyes, and a quiet strength that didn't need loud words. His ranch sat on a wide piece of land that stretched toward the foothills, a place where open fields met the sky in soft lines. Life on the ranch moved slowly, each day shaped by sunrises, chores, and the rhythm of nature. People in the nearby town knew Caleb as a kind soul who didn't talk much but always helped when asked. He lived alone now, except for his loyal old dog, Scout, a gentle, aging shepherd, with gray fur around his muzzle and eyes full of wisdom. Scout followed him everywhere, as if he had taken it upon himself to make sure Caleb was never truly alone. Caleb had lost his wife, Emily, a few years earlier, and though the sadness no longer hurt the way it once had, it still lived in the quieter corners of his heart. He had learned to fill his days with work and simple joys. He fixed fences, tended cattle, mended tools, and took long rides across the land to make sure everything was safe. The ranch was peaceful, and he appreciated the quiet company of the wind, the birds, and Scout's soft footsteps beside him. On the evening that Lena wandered across the empty land, Caleb was out checking the fence line along the north pasture. Earlier that morning, he had noticed signs that coyotes had passed through. They rarely caused trouble, but a loose portion of fence could let cattle roam too far. Caleb preferred to fix problems before they became real problems. The sun had dipped low, leaving the world washed in orange and gold. The air was warm, but carried a cool edge that hinted at nightfall. Caleb rode his horse, Willow, a gentle mare, with a smooth gait. Scout trotted beside them, ears twitching as he sniffed the air. The world felt peaceful, wrapped in soft light and quiet sounds. Caleb hummed under his breath as he rode, a tune Emily used to sing when they cooked dinner together. It brought him comfort, simple, safe, familiar. He reached the stretch of fence that looked a little uneven from a distance. After tying Willow's reins to a post, he knelt down to check the wire. Just a small fix. Nothing too troublesome. Scout wandered a few feet away, nose low to the ground. His ears perked suddenly, and he let out a soft sound, not quite a bark. More like a gentle alert. Caleb looked up. "What is it, boy?" Scout didn't move. His eyes stayed fixed on something in the distance, his tail stiff with curiosity. Caleb stood slowly, brushing dust off his jeans. He followed the direction of Scout's gaze. At first, he saw nothing but tall grass shifting lightly in the evening breeze. Then, something moved small, uncertain. A figure. Someone was walking. Someone small. Caleb squinted, trying to make sense of the shape. It looked like a child, tired, slow, and struggling to stay upright. The sight made him pause. Children did not wander out here. Ranchland was far from any houses or neighborhoods. The closest community was miles away. No one walked out here, unless something was wrong. Scout trotted forward a few steps, looking back at Caleb as if urging him to follow. "All right," Caleb murmured. "Let's go see." He climbed onto Willow and guided her toward the child. The closer he got, the clearer the sight became. It was a girl, thin, dusty, with a small bag slung over her shoulder. Her steps were unsteady, and her head drooped as though she were fighting sleep. Caleb slowed his horse so he wouldn't startle her. "Hey there," he called gently, his voice soft, like speaking to a frightened animal. The girl stopped and looked up. Her eyes were wide, filled with confusion and exhaustion. She didn't move away, but she didn't step forward either. She stood very still, as if unsure whether she should trust the man approaching her. Caleb brought Willow to a stop and slid down from the saddle. Scout stayed close to his side, his tail wagging lightly to show friendliness. Caleb crouched a little, so he wouldn't tower over the girl. "Are you all right?" he asked softly. "You look tired. Do you need some help?" The girl swallowed silently. Her lips parted as if she wanted to speak, but no words came. Caleb could see that she was scared not of him, but of everything that had happened before he found her. "My name is Caleb," he said, keeping his tone warm. "And this here is Scout. He's friendly. Don't worry. If you're lost, I can help you get home." The girl's gaze drifted to Scout, whose gentle eyes and slow wag seemed to comfort her. Then she looked back at Caleb and whispered, barely audible, "I don't have a home." Caleb felt something shift inside his chest, a quiet ache. He didn't press her with questions. He could see she wasn't ready to explain. Instead, he offered a kind smile. Well, why don't you come with me for now, he said. I live just a short ride from here. You can rest, have something to eat, and we can figure things out together. The girl hesitated. She looked down at her dusty shoes, then at the empty road behind her, as if realizing that turning back wasn't an option. Finally, she nodded very slowly. Caleb stepped forward carefully. May I help you onto the horse? She nodded again. He lifted her gently, making sure she felt safe, and settled her on Willow's back. Scout walked close, sensing her discomfort. Caleb held the reins and began walking beside the horse at a slow pace. The girl held the saddle horn tightly, though her body relaxed little by little with each gentle sway of the horse's movement. What's your name? Caleb asked after a few minutes, giving her time. Lena, she said softly. That's a pretty name, he replied. I'm glad Scout spotted you. It's not safe to be out here so late. Lena didn't answer, but she glanced at Scout again with something like gratitude. The journey back to the ranch took some time, but the sky was lit with stars by the time Caleb saw the warm glow of his porch light in the distance. The peaceful sight had always reminded him that no matter how long the day had been, home was waiting. He helped Lena down from the horse and guided her inside. The ranch house was simple wooden floors, soft lighting, and the faint scent of fresh bread he had baked earlier that morning. Scout followed them in and lay near the door, keeping a quiet eye on their new guest. You can sit anywhere you like, Caleb said kindly. Are you hungry? Lena nodded slowly. Caleb warmed some soup and placed a glass of water on the table. She ate quietly, taking small bites. He didn't rush her or ask too many questions. He knew that sometimes silence was the best comfort. After dinner, he brought out a soft blanket and a small pillow. You can rest here tonight, he said, pointing to the comfortable couch near the fireplace. You're safe. In the morning, we'll talk more and figure out what you need. Lena clutched the blanket and looked at him as if trying to understand whether she could trust this gentle stranger. His warm expression and calm presence seemed to reassure her. Thank you, she whispered. You're welcome, Caleb replied softly. You're not alone anymore. Lena curled under the blanket, exhaustion pulling her eyelids down. She listened to the soft crackle of the fire, the steady rhythm of Scout's breathing, and the peaceful quiet of the ranch house. It felt different from any place she had been before, warm, safe, and full of a kindness she had forgotten existed. As she drifted into sleep, Caleb sat for a moment in the nearby rocking chair, watching over her with quiet concern. He didn't know her story yet, but he could sense it was heavy. Whoever had left her alone out there had made a choice that no child should ever face. He reached down to scratch Scout behind the ears. Good job, boy, he murmured. You brought her to us. Scout wagged his tail softly. Outside, the night stretched calm and wide over the ranch. Inside, for the first time in a long while, Lena slept without fear. And Caleb knew, deep in his heart, that her arrival was no coincidence. It felt as if life had gently placed her in his path for a reason he did not yet understand. Lena woke the next morning to the soft smell of something warm drifting through the air. For a moment, she didn't know where she was. The couch beneath her felt softer than any bed she had slept in for a long time, and the quiet of the house seemed different from the emptiness she was used to. There was no rushing, no loud footsteps, no sharp voice telling her to hurry. Instead, she heard the gentle crackle of a fire, the distant sound of cattle, and the soft movements of someone in the kitchen. She sat up slowly, the blanket sliding down her shoulders. Scout lifted his head from where he lay near the door and wagged his tail once, as if to say good morning. The simple gesture made her feel strangely welcome, as though she belonged in this quiet place, far more than she ever had in the crowded spaces of her past. Caleb turned from the stove when he heard her shift. His face softened with a warm, reassuring smile. You're awake, he said gently. How did you sleep? Lena nodded, shy but honest. Good. That's good to hear, he replied. Breakfast is almost ready. Take your time. She watched him move around the kitchen. His steps were calm, unhurried, and steady. Everything he did seemed to have a quiet purpose, placing plates on the table, pouring juice into a glass, checking the pan of scrambled eggs. He was a man who understood routine, who found peace in the small tasks that filled each morning. Lena stood and walked slowly to the table. She felt a little unsure, but Caleb's warmth made it easier. He placed a plate in front of her: eggs, toast, and a few slices of fruit. She hesitated only a second before taking a bite. The food was simple but full of warmth, the kind that made her chest feel strangely full. As she ate, Caleb sat across from her with his own plate. He didn't ask questions right away. He let her eat in peace, giving her space to gather her thoughts. Only when she set down her fork did he speak softly. "Lena," he said, "you don't have to tell me anything you're not ready to share. But I want you to know you're safe here. And if you need help, I'll do what I can." Quote. She lowered her eyes. For a moment, she felt that old familiar tightening in her chest, the one that came whenever someone asked her something important. But she knew Caleb wasn't demanding anything. He was simply offering his kindness. After a long pause, she spoke quietly. "I was walking for a long time yesterday. I figured you'd been out there a while," he replied gently. "My stepfather left." She paused, searching for the right words. "He said someone would find me." And then he walked away. Caleb's fingers tightened slightly around his mug, but his voice stayed calm and soft. "I'm sorry you went through that, Lena. You didn't deserve to be left alone out there." She looked up, surprised at how easily and sincerely the words came from him. No one had ever spoken to her like that before. Not with gentleness that felt real. Caleb continued, "I want to make sure you're protected. I think we should talk to the sheriff. He's a good man. He won't be upset with you or anything like that. He'll just want to help." Lena's breath caught lightly. The word sheriff made her nervous, though she wasn't sure why. Maybe because she had grown used to keeping her troubles quiet, hiding them so they wouldn't get worse. But Caleb seemed to understand her hesitation. "You don't have to decide right now," he added. "Just think about it. We'll take things one step at a time." The way he said it eased her worries. She nodded slowly. After breakfast, Caleb invited her to join him outside. The morning sun spread across the ranch like a soft blanket of light. Birds chirped. The air felt fresh and clean. Lena followed him to the barn, where Willow stood in her stall, flicking her tail lazily. Scout trotted ahead, happy to be out on the land again. "Would you like to help with some chores?" Caleb asked. "Nothing hard, just a few simple things." Lena felt a small flicker of excitement. She had never been part of a farm or ranch before. She nodded, and Caleb handed her a small bucket of oats. "You can feed Willow," he said, showing her how to hold the bucket safely. "She's gentle." Willow nudged Lena's arm softly, recognizing the bucket. Lena giggled, an unfamiliar sound she hadn't heard from herself in a long time. She stroked the horse's smooth neck as Willow ate. The simple moment filled her with a strange sense of peace. They spent the morning tending to chores together. Lena filled water buckets while Caleb checked the fences near the barn. She gathered eggs from the chicken coop, marveling at how warm and smooth the shells felt. Scout followed her everywhere, as if he had decided she needed a loyal shadow. By noon, Lena felt lighter, as if the ranch were gently brushing the dust of her old life away. After lunch, Caleb finally made a quiet call to the sheriff. He stepped outside to talk, not wanting to worry Lena. He explained the situation calmly, carefully avoiding details that might make her feel exposed. The sheriff promised to visit later that day. Caleb returned to Lena, who sat on the porch steps with Scout's head resting on her lap. She looked up with a mix of curiosity and nervousness. "I talked to the sheriff," Caleb said gently. "He'd like to come by and meet you, just to make sure you're okay, and to see what we can do moving forward. He's kind, I promise." Lena nodded, though her hands tightened in Scout's fur. Caleb noticed and sat beside her. "You're not in trouble," he reminded her softly. "You've done nothing wrong. The sheriff just wants to help you." They waited together as the afternoon sun drifted across the sky. When the sheriff finally drove up the long dirt road, Lena's heartbeat quickened. The sheriff stepped out of his car, a tall man with kind eyes and a relaxed smile. "Well now," he said gently. "You must be Lena. I've heard Caleb took good care of you." Lena nodded, her voice too soft to use. The sheriff sat in a porch chair instead of standing, lowering himself to her eye level so he wouldn't seem intimidating. He asked simple questions: whether she was hurt, whether she needed anything, whether she felt comfortable talking. He didn't push for details. He listened. Lena told him small pieces of her story. How she and Roy had moved often. How the truck broke down. How she woke each day not knowing what would happen next. How the long walk had felt endless until Scout and Caleb found her. Caleb stayed nearby, his presence steady and reassuring. Every time Lena faltered, he offered a small nod that seemed to say, "You're doing fine." The sheriff's expression softened as he listened. "You've been very brave," he said. "More brave than most adults would have been." Lena looked down, not used to praise, but she felt a warm glow in her chest. After their talk, the sheriff stood and spoke privately with Caleb on the porch. Lena sat quietly with Scout, stroking his fur. She watched the breeze sway the grass, the sunlight dance across the land. For the first time in years, she did not feel like the world was closing in on her. Instead, it felt wide and hopeful. Caleb returned to her with a gentle smile. "The sheriff is going to try to find out where Roy went," he said softly. "But for now, you can stay here. No rush, no pressure. We'll take each day as it comes." Lena swallowed. "You want me to stay?" "If you'd like to," Caleb replied. "You don't have to decide everything today. But you're welcome here for as long as you need." The offer settled around her like the softest blanket. She nodded, a little overwhelmed, but deeply grateful. She didn't know what the future looked like. Not entirely, but she knew she wasn't alone anymore. That knowledge filled her with a quiet strength she had never felt before. The rest of the evening passed peacefully. Caleb showed her how to mix feed for the chickens. Scout stayed close, always keeping an eye on her, as if he understood her heart needed steady company. When the stars began to appear, Lena stood outside and looked at the sky. The constellations shimmered above, bright and endless. Caleb joined her on the porch. "Beautiful night," he said softly. Lena nodded. "I didn't know stars could look so close." "They always look brighter on nights like this," Caleb replied. "When the world is quiet." Lena glanced at him, then back at the sky. "I feel different," she whispered. "Not scared. Just safe." Caleb smiled, a gentle, grateful smile. "I'm glad." As the night settled and the ranch drifted into silence, Lena felt something she had not felt in a very long time: hope. Not the fragile kind that broke easily, but a steady, warm hope that grew quietly inside her, promising that good things were still possible. She didn't know what tomorrow would bring, but now, she believed tomorrow could be better than yesterday, and that was enough. Days passed on the ranch, and Lena began to feel a rhythm she had not known in years. Every morning, she woke to the soft sunlight spilling through the curtains, Scout's warm fur pressed against her legs, and the quiet, steady presence of Caleb moving about the kitchen. She learned the routines of the ranch, helped feed the animals, collected eggs, and even tried her hand at milking a cow under Caleb's patient guidance. Each task, no matter how small, made her feel capable, needed, and part of something bigger than herself. Caleb never rushed her or pressured her to talk. He simply offered comfort, guidance, and encouragement. His gentle words became a quiet anchor in her life. Slowly, Lena began to open up, telling him small stories of her past: how she missed her mother, how moving from place to place had made her feel invisible, and how sometimes she felt the world was too big and too lonely for someone like her. Caleb listened, never interrupting, never judging, only offering quiet understanding. The sheriff visited occasionally, always kind and calm, ensuring Lena was safe and cared for. Each visit reminded her that the world could be filled with people who genuinely wanted to help. She learned that her stepfather had left town, and that authorities were looking for him not in a threatening way, but to make sure he could not leave another child in danger. Lena felt a mix of relief and unease. She wasn't ready to confront him, and she didn't want to think about what could have happened if Caleb had not been there. One warm morning, as the sun painted the sky with soft pinks and oranges, Lena noticed Caleb moving along the fence line, inspecting the posts. She decided to join him, feeling more confident with each passing day. Willow followed them slowly, while Scout trotted ahead, tail wagging. "I think the north fence might need some extra support after the rain last week," Caleb said, pointing at a section that leaned slightly. "Would you like to help me hammer in the stakes?" Lena nodded eagerly. She loved the feeling of holding the hammer, the sound of it striking the wood echoing across the quiet fields. It was simple work, but every nail she drove in felt like a small victory. Caleb guided her gently, offering tips without taking over. With each successful strike, Lena felt stronger, more capable. As they worked, Caleb glanced at her with a small smile. "You know, Lena, life out here has its quiet moments, but it also teaches patience. You've been brave in ways I can hardly imagine. I think that courage will carry you far." Lena paused, looking at him. "I never thought about myself as brave," she admitted softly. "I was just surviving." "Sometimes surviving is the bravest thing a person can do," Caleb said. "And now, you're learning how to live, not just survive." The days continued this way. A gentle routine of chores, meals, and quiet conversations. Lena began to sketch again in her notebook, capturing Willow's graceful movements, the way sunlight fell across the barns, and even Scout's loyal expressions. Her sketches became a way to remember that beauty could exist even after fear and uncertainty. Then one afternoon, as Lena swept the porch, Caleb approached with a serious expression. "Lena," he said softly, "I need to talk to you about something important. Your stepfather. Authorities believe he might try to come back. We don't know when, but we need to be prepared." Lena froze, gripping the broom tightly. The thought of seeing him again made her chest tighten. She had thought about him often, sometimes with anger, sometimes with sadness, but she had felt safe in Caleb's care. Caleb crouched to her level, placing a reassuring hand on her shoulder. "You don't have to face him alone. You're not alone anymore, Lena. I promise." The following evening, the peacefulness of the ranch was interrupted by the sound of a vehicle approaching the dirt road. Lena's heart beat quickly as she recognized the figure stepping out of the car. It was him, her stepfather. He looked older, rougher, and weary, but his eyes found hers immediately. For a moment, Lena's breath caught, and she felt the weight of fear she hadn't experienced in weeks. Caleb stepped forward, calm but firm. "You need to leave," he said quietly but firmly. "This is not the place to come back to." Her stepfather's expression twisted with frustration, but Caleb didn't flinch. Scout growled softly, standing at Caleb's side, and Willow shifted uneasily, sensing tension. "I just want to talk to her," her stepfather said. "She's mine." "No," Caleb replied steadily. "You do not get to decide her safety. That has already been decided. She's not alone anymore, and she won't be going anywhere with you." At that moment, the sheriff arrived. Calmly, he stepped out of his vehicle and approached. His presence brought immediate relief to Lena. She saw that she was protected, that the law was on her side, and that her life was no longer defined by fear. The sheriff explained the situation to her stepfather clearly but without anger. "You've left a child in danger before," he said. "We cannot allow that to happen again. You will have to answer for your actions. Lena is safe here, and she will remain safe." Lena watched as he was escorted away, feeling a mix of relief and disbelief. She didn't feel triumphant or vengeful, just safe. The fear that had shadowed her days for so long was finally lifting. Caleb gently guided her back to the porch. "It's over," he said softly. "You're safe. No one can take that away from you." Tears came to Lena's eyes, not from sadness, but from the weight of years of fear finally being lifted. She looked at Caleb, who offered a comforting smile, and then at Scout, lying peacefully at her feet. The warmth of the ranch, the sun setting over the fields, the gentle presence of someone who cared. It all felt like home. In the weeks that followed, Lena continued to heal. She explored more of the ranch, helped with the animals, and even started to teach Scout a few small tricks for fun. Caleb taught her practical skills: how to fix a fence, how to care for the animals, and even a little about reading maps and understanding the land. Each day, she grew stronger, more confident, and more certain that she could trust people again. One evening, as they sat together on the porch watching the stars appear, Caleb spoke quietly. "Lena, I know you've been through a lot, and I can't replace what you've lost. But I can offer you something that matters. A safe place, someone to care for you, and a home that you can rely on." Lena nodded slowly, feeling the truth of his words in her heart. "I'd like that," she whispered. Caleb smiled. "Then, let's make it official. I'd like to become your guardian. You won't have to worry about anyone leaving you or hurting you. This ranch is yours too, if you want it." The moment felt gentle and right. Lena felt a warmth spread through her chest, a feeling of belonging she had never experienced before. She wasn't just a visitor on this land. She was part of it, and part of the life Caleb had built with patience, care, and love. The days turned into weeks, and Lena settled fully into her new life. She laughed again, shared stories with Caleb, and even made friends in the nearby town when she ventured out with him. The ranch became a place of safety, learning, and growth, a place where she could imagine a future full of possibilities. One morning, Lena stood on a small hill near the edge of the ranch, looking at the fields stretched beneath the rising sun. She felt the soft breeze on her face, smelled the fresh grass, and listened to Scout barking happily at Willow in the pasture. She thought about her past, about the long walks she had taken alone, and the fear that had haunted her. But she also thought about the people who had helped her: Caleb, Scout, and the sheriff who had ensured her safety. A smile touched her lips. The world felt wide and full of hope, not frightening or lonely. She had survived, yes, but she had also learned to live again. She had learned that even after difficult times, there could be moments of peace, kindness, and warmth. Caleb joined her on the hill, standing silently beside her. They watched the sun rise together, the golden light spilling over the fields, bathing everything in warmth. Lena knew she had found more than safety. She had found family, belonging, and the courage to hope again. And in that quiet moment, with the wind brushing softly, and Scout lying near their feet, Lena realized that her life was no longer defined by the past. She had been left alone once, but she had also been found. She had been afraid, but now she felt strong. And as the light grew across the horizon, Lena understood that she could face anything, as long as she had love, kindness, and the gentle strength of those who truly cared by her side. The ranch was no longer just Caleb's, it was hers too. It was home, and for the first time in many years, Lena smiled without fear, knowing that she would never be left alone again.